Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Slingin Leather YouTube channel. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Radio to Paul's official combat sports show now has its own format right here on YouTube. Even though I can't be on the radio back in Chicago, I could definitely be back on YouTube right here, guys. And we're going to be giving all of you MMA fanatics the same type of content that you loved about the original show. We're going to be giving you those fight picks. We're going to be giving you those fight recaps. We're going to be giving you all the types of combat sports news you could possibly crave, and we are going to be opening the realm, the scope of this channel through this YouTube format, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity to do so. But right now, we have some huge business to attend to, ladies and gentlemen. UFC 290 is this weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada, kicking off July. International Fight Week happened later this month. Just an absolutely loaded month of fights, and kicking it off with two title fights. The title unification bout between Alexander Volkanovski for the featherweight title, as well as Alexander Pantoja challenging Brandon Moreno for his undisputed flyweight title, and that is going to be absolute fireworks. But we're going to break down this whole main card for you. Main card for the West Coast starting at 5 p.m. Main card for the Central Time from my friends over in Chicago, 7 p.m. And it is going to be an absolute barn burner, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to have a great night of fights being kicked off by one of MMA's brightest stars right now and one of the hottest middleweight prospects in the division in Bo Nickal. Now, Nickal was originally slated to take on Tresean Gore, another really big middleweight who's really looking to pose some problems for Nickal, but unfortunately got injured early in this fight week. We saw in the Undisputed episode early this week that Bo Nickal was especially distraught and upset about having Tresean pull out of the fight. However, the UFC was able to find a replacement in Valentin Woodburn, another undefeated middleweight. So this has suddenly become a matchup where someone's always at stake, ladies and gentlemen. And despite Valentin never being in the UFC, we're going to have a great fight regardless. And Nickal, just for those who haven't had the fortune of watching his career thus far, has had one of the most sensational career starts in recent memory. Despite the alleged groin shot against Jamie Pickett in his previous fight, I think that really didn't have a whole lot to do with the overall decision or the way the fight went. I just think that Bo Nickal has had such a stellar undefeated run thus far. Only 4 MMA fights, and has 3 straight first round submission finishes. Oh, and by the way, that other win before that was by knockout. So just one of the most dominant starts to any career. He got 2 wins in the Dana White Contender Series, and one of the most ridiculous sequences I have ever seen. The left hand he threw to an ankle pick to take, I think it was Greg Beard down and submit him. Just sensational. And taking on another guy who is another grappler is going to really give him the opportunity to show what type of pedigree he's really at, what level his grappling really is at. And as I mentioned, he possesses fantastic wrestling and excellent jiu-jitsu, and does a great job of mixing those two together, as well as incorporating his striking into his bread and butter, which is his grappling. And he already has a win by knockout, so he clearly has that knockout power against anyone. We really haven't seen that type of knockout power in the UFC quite yet, but he has displayed complete and utter a level of dominance thus far that almost seems Khabib-like or Hamzat-like, or something inordinately special early in someone in his career. And he is taking on another fellow undefeated middleweight in Val Woodburn, who is 7-0 right now, has a little bit more experience than Nickal. Last fight he fought at was at Combat Night Pro, where he actually won their championship. That promotion does lie in Florida. And he has currently 5 wins by TKO. And he stepped in last minute to replace Tresean Gore in a completely different matchup, in my opinion. Tresean Gore was a little bit more well-rounded, while Woodburn's mainly a striker. And I see this going very, very poorly for Woodburn. He's taking this fight on less than a week's notice, and he is fighting one of the stars that was shot out of an absolute cannon when he was first put in the UFC. And with the conviction and the drive that Bo Nickal has in himself and has exhibited throughout every interview and every opportunity he's had to speak for himself, it really shows just how incredible this man's self-efficacy is and how much he truly believes that he is the next big thing in the middleweight division, which leads me to pick Bo Nickel to pick up right where he left off via submission. I don't see Woodburn really doing too much good on the ground, and I don't think it's really going to go well for him, leading me to pick Bo Nickel for this first fight of our wonderfully stacked main card. Next, we have one of MMA's definitive BMFs in Dan Hooker, the number 12 lightweight in the world, taking on Jalen the Tarantula Turner in a fight that I feel like may very well be fight of the night. Whenever Dan Hooker fights, you just sit and watch. He is the epitome of the BMF in just about every capacity. He throws caution to the wind. He'll take on anybody on any day's notice. He is perseverant. Heck, he's only 2-4 in his last 6, yet we're still talking about him like he has the chance to string some wins together and eventually realize a title shot. Do I think this is going to happen? Not necessarily, but despite this being the case, he has become the the New Zealand version of Donald Cerrone, where he will take on anyone, anywhere, and kick the living hell out of him. Because this guy is so dang good, despite him having a rather bad losing streak with 2-4. He is coming off a win against Claudio Poyes, who really did not have the best endurance or performance in that fight, but it was a great opportunity for Dan to show that if he really dictates the pace at which a fight is fought at, he has the opportunity to lull his opponent to sleep and wait for those opportunities. He hasn't hit anyone with the knee that everyone was talking about in his fight leading up to Dustin Poirier, but I feel like if he's able to keep some range and at least pick his spots, he may have the chance to upset Jalen Turner in this fight. But just like Jalen is, he's really struggled with explosive opponents, and those opponents that have incredible power, namely Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier, people that have thunderous power in the lightweight division that are smaller than Jalen Turner. And I think this will be his undoing if Dan Hooker is able to realize some success in the early going. I don't see it lasting very long because Turner has just been on a tear. He is 5-1 in his last 6. Unfortunately, his last fight was a narrow split decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot. And I think this guy possesses some of the best tangibles in the lightweight division. He's 6'3". He's absolutely ginormous, super long for the weight class, very diverse and explosive in his striking approach. He reminds me of Terrence McKinney a lot because they're both very explosive and very unorthodox in their approach to striking. And his ground game has been severely underrated. He does have several wins recently via chokes, and I think he definitely can compete with Dan Hooker on the feet. I just think that if he's really struggling to get anything going on the feet, he really has to take this fight to the ground or fight tooth and nail to get this fight to the ground, because we know how good Dan Hooker's takedown defense is. So having that said, how do I see this going? There's so many contentious attributes that these two have. Dan Hooker could come out more explosive than we've ever seen and may take it to Turner in a way that many of us wouldn't really believe the old Dan Hooker would. But I think that Jalen Turner simply has too many ways to win this fight. I think it's very possible that he could knock out Dan Hooker come Saturday. But I also feel like if he's able to get him to the ground, Dan Hooker has shown submission defense holes against Islam and against other fighters that aren't named Claudio Poyes, who someone who's not spamming leg locks. And I do see this playing in Turner's favor. I see him taking the fight to the ground and maybe hitting some ground and pound. Let's see if he's able to lock up a submission. I do have Jalen Turner taking this fight by unanimous decision, though. Next, we have Robert the Reaper Whittaker, the number 2 middleweight in the world, taking on Dricus du Plessis, DDP himself, one of the hottest middleweights in the world right now, currently ranked at number 5. But Dricus is going to have his hands full, because if we're talking about Robert Whittaker, He is simply the best middleweight in the world in the last 10 years that's not named Israel Adesanya. He has not lost to anyone named Israel Adesanya since February 2nd of 2014. Nearly 10 years ago, he suffered a loss to Stephen Thompson and has not lost to another middleweight not named Israel Adesanya since. He has looked so good. A decade of complete dominance. He hasn't really been in many close fights that aren't with, obviously, Israel Adesanya. The two biggest glaring holes in that are Yoel Romero. His two fights with Yoel Romero, which he came out injured and is fighting a man that's literally made of steel and testosterone, is still able to come out on top. And he has one of the most holistic and well-rounded skill sets in the UFC. I don't think people give his wrestling enough respect. He is not one to chase submissions. He's not one to choke you out or break your arm or dislocate your knee. He is the one that will take you to the ground simply because this is how he knows he's going to beat you. He is better than you. He's already better than you at striking, but he knows you can't wrestle. So when he takes you down, he can keep you there, especially just like he was able to with Darren Till on a couple occasions. And despite him facing a 2.5-inch reach disadvantage against du Plessis, we all know how Robert Whittaker is one of the most explosive and most technical fighters in the UFC. And when it comes to closing distance and utilizing combinations and just finding openings, Robert Whittaker is one of the absolute best in the UFC to do it. But we cannot count out Dricus du Plessis. He's one of the bigger middleweights in the division, and despite Robert being a slight-framed middleweight to begin with, he has been on an absolute tear as of late. He is undefeated in his last 7 fights, beating guys by the name of Trevin Giles, Darren Till, and Derek Brunson. Darren Till and Derek Brunson have also been defeated by Robert Whittaker, so this does show that those two are on a comparable level just based on the opponents that they've faced. And he's one of the heaviest hitters in the middleweight division. And he's shown this with TKO victories and the ability to rock his opponent at any point in the fight. And despite his good wrestling defense, I see him gassing out in this fight. If you have seen his past few fights, it has gotten to the point where you're really questioning whether or not he's going to be able to complete all 3 rounds, considering how much he puts in his first 2 rounds and how much he steps on the gas early in the fight. His gas tank has been questioned heavily because of this reason. And despite Dricus having a large reach advantage in this fight and having knockout power in both hands, I really see Robert Whittaker outpacing him, outstriking him, and out mixed martial artsing him in this fight. I think he's going to use every tool in the arsenal to take out Dricus du Plessis, but I think ultimately it's going to end with his classic right straight, left cross, head kick TKO, and it is going to be a stuff of beauty, a thing of absolute beauty, ladies and gentlemen. I see this being one of the best fights of the year. Next, we have the assassin baby himself, the undisputed king, the slayer of Davison Figueiredo, and one of the most beloved fighters in Mexico and in the UFC as a whole, Brandon, the assassin baby Moreno, taking on Alessandro Pantoja, a man whom he's lost to already twice in his mixed martial arts career for the flyweight championship. This is going to be one of the most interesting fights on the card. I think this may be the most high-level fight we're going to see on the card because both these guys are so incredibly well-rounded. Brandon Moreno, he had to throw the kitchen sink at Davison Figueiredo throughout their fights. And in his last fight, he really showed that once he was able to escape the ground, and since he had worked on his striking, he really is a holistic mixed martial artist. And when you're taking on a guy like Alexander Pantoja, you are going to have to use every tool in the arsenal. You're going to have to throw the kitchen sink at him once again, because this guy is just about is basically a Davison Figueiredo, but instead leading on his grappling. Davison had knockout power in both hands. That was his biggest facet, especially when he knocks down Joseph Benavidez 3 times in 1 round. It's his power that he labors on the most. Despite him being able to keep up with the grappling of Brandon Moreno, Alexander Pantoja is on a completely different level when it comes to grappling in comparison to Davison Figueiredo. And Moreno is going to have to use every ankle pick, every sweep, every transition on the ground. I think this fight is bound to go to the ground. I don't think there's a version of this fight where it does not go to the ground. And despite despite his high level jiu-jitsu in Brandon Moreno, Alessandro Pantoja can never be denied. He's currently 6-2 since he last fought Brandon Moreno, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak after losing a unanimous decision to now departed Askar Askarov. And he has previously done nothing but dominate Brandon Moreno. In their first fight in the Ultimate Fighter, he took him down and submitted him. And in their third fight, it was a very, very one-sided unanimous decision victory for Pantoja. And he's going to have to use all of his tools to defeat the flyweight king as well. His excellent grappling and fluid striking, I think, are going to do a lot of work for him. I think that Brandon has closed the gap with a lot of different flyweights in terms of his level of striking. So I think that he is going to have some. I mean, he's going to have some actual competition when it comes to the striking of Brandon Moreno. However, he will have a 2-inch reach disadvantage. Alexander Pantoja, I feel that if he was the exact size as Brandon Moreno, this would be a literal coin flip. I think these two are so evenly matched on every single level of mixed martial arts that I would rule it an absolute draw if they had every single identical tangible, the same reach, the same height, the same weight, everything. But Pantoja's coming into this on with a 2-inch reach disadvantage and against a guy who's really worked to develop his jab, where Brandon Moreno was doing a great job using his lead hand and using his leg kicks. And his newfound favorite target, the body, especially how he hit Kai Kara France with some great shots to the body. I think that Brandon's going to come in there a much more diverse striker, and I think this is going to be the main X factor in their fight. I don't really see either fighter tapping each other out. I really respect Alexander Pantoja's ground game, and he's one of the best grapplers in the flyweight division. But Brandon Moreno's defense, as shown in all 4 of the Davison Figueiredo fights are excellent. And I see with that 2-inch reach disadvantage in regards to Pantoja, that being a much larger disadvantage than a lot of people are going to realize. So I have Brandon Moreno taking this fight by split decision. I think this is going to be razor close, and this may be the second coming of the Davison Figueiredo Brandon Moreno quadrilogy, with Alexander Pantoja having to fight him for the 3rd time now, possibly the 4th time if this is a really close fight, which I really think it is going to be. And yeah, that is going to be an absolute barn burner. I just know that is going to be mouth-watering for so many high-level grapplers out there. It's just going to be an absolute treat for a lot of fans to watch. And finally, wrapping up this card, we have Alexander Volkanovski taking on the interim champion Yair Rodriguez for the featherweight championship of the world. This is the unifying belt, ladies and gentlemen, and not a lot of people are really looking into this fight. Not a lot of people are truly dissecting how Yair could realistically do, because Volk's dominance has overshadowed so many of the arguments that people have been putting in Yair's favor. Alexander Volkanovski is the pound for pound best for a reason. There's nothing but complete dominance when you watch him fight. The last time he ever really struggled in the featherweight division specifically. We all know that his fight against Islam Makhachev was especially difficult, but the only time he really realized any resistance in the featherweight division was against Max Holloway in their second fight, where he was able to open up with some head kicks and was able to drop Volk in several opportunities. I literally think he has had the most dominant featherweight reign since Jose Aldo, and I don't really think that's saying much. He has insane cardio, the gas tank and basically a limitless gas tank from what we've seen. Incredible power in both hands, which translates to the later rounds, which is huge for a guy like Volkanovski, who really relies on his structure, his power, his beer keg kind of build to have a lot of power in his shots. And despite being one of the highest level fighters in the UFC right now, and showcasing his dominance and experience and every superlative you could possibly give to a champion, he has shown. But just based on how Yair Rodriguez approaches fighting, he is going to have his hands full on this evening. Yair Rodriguez is one of, if not the most wild striker in mixed martial arts history. His background in Taekwondo has afforded him to have a vast arsenal of kicks and spinning attacks that is just some of the most spectacular and artistic expressions of mixed martial arts that I've ever seen. And despite him being a striker, categorized a striker by so many different people, we showed in his interim title victory, it was shown that his interim title victory, that he's also very dangerous off of his back. He was able to submit Josh Emmett with a triangle, and I don't think anyone had Yair Rodriguez winning by submission. The line that night was plus 2,000 for Yair to get a submission. And that just speaks to how out of left field that submission came. And I think that did a lot to prove that he can compete with someone off his back and on the ground. But there's going to be so much that Yair has to do to win this fight. And he's, especially when it comes to fights against longtime champions, you have to beat the champion to become the champion. And there are a few ways that Yair can do this. I know his length and his speed will be his greatest assets in this fight. He is going to have to lull Volk to sleep. He is going to have to utilize his feints and be as unpredictable as possible. So when the opportunity comes to use his long weapons, to use his kicks, he is going to have the most success and have the most likelihood to knock out Alexander Volkanovski. And I think this is going to take the perfect fight from Yair Rodriguez. And I don't really see him being able to do this convincingly enough for me to put my name in his hat. I got to put it in Alex Volkanov. No, I can't even do that. I'm sorry. Alexander Volkanovski has had an incredible title reign thus far and has done an incredible job at being a great champion. And I think it's going to take a Herculean effort from Yair. I've been going back and forth on this fight all day. And if I'm going to be honest, if I had to put my name in one hat, I got to take my name out of Alex's hat and put it into Yair's hat, because something special I feel like is in the works for Saturday. I think Yair is going to be able to open up with some great kicks and is going to create some opportunities for himself. So, final pick, final decision after arguing with myself for the past 2 hours at who is actually going to win this fight, I got to give it to Yair Rodriguez. I think he may do this, and I think he may do it in stunning fashion. And ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the main card for UFC 290. Again, 5 p.m. for the West Coast, 7 p.m. for my friends over in Chicago. And we'll see you again next time. We're going to do a recap for this event, and we are going to be tweeting out all the updates for the fight on Slingin Leather on Twitter with a G. Slingin Leather. Same thing for YouTube. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching the inaugural episode, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you next time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.